The Bible is very clear on what love is and what love is not. Now, we're all products of our environment, and the problem is some of us just learn wrong because our parents learned wrong. They could only give us what they were given, and it becomes a vicious cycle in your family until somebody breaks the cycle. Now, a lot of us were taught that strong women or strong men stick it out. They stay and fix it. Well, two people make up the marriage, and if the people don't get fixed, neither will the marriage. You must first come to the realization that you are broke and need to be fixed. It's the sick that need a physician. Yes, I believe God can do anything. Yes, he can fix your marriage if he wants to. But now what if he has decided not to fix it? Specifically, if it is abusive. Maybe God has seen all that abuse that you suffered. And he's saying enough is enough. And he's provided a way out. Will you take that way of escape? In an abusive relationship, both the victim and the abuser need help. The abuser needs help to change their abusive behavior, and the victim needs help understanding why they accept the abusive behavior. So some people do stay in abusive relationships because they love their partner. They truly do love their partner. And guess what? I believe them. I've been in this field for a long time, and they truly do love their partner. In many cases, they've been with their partner for a long time. They built a life together. They have kids together. They've invested a lot into keeping the relationship or the marriage together. And that lifestyle has become their normal. That's their normal. That's what they're used to. So they change in order to adapt to that environment. And it's actually a coping mechanism. So even when they have an opportunity to leave, they choose to stay. You have to understand that the person who is choosing to stay in an abusive relationship is caught up in a vicious cycle. And there is a cycle that psychologists talk about. It's 3 phases. The experts call this cycle is comprised of 3 different phases that happen during this relationship and during this cycle of violence. And it's the tension building phase, the battering phase, and the honeymoon phase. This particular example that I'm going to give tonight is where the male is the abuser. The first phase is called the tension building phase. This is the cycle that psychologists talk about that happens during the course of an abusive relationship. Remember, the person that is in an abusive relationship, specifically if they are in an abusive relationship for a long time, they are caught up in a vicious cycle. There are 3 phases that are in this cycle. The first one is the tension building phase. And this is the phase where the abuser becomes edgy, critical, and just plain irritable. He doesn't need a reason to feel this way. She knows what's coming, and she may try to pacify him, which is a waste of time. And in some cases, it actually triggers the violence. Being around the abuser during this time is like walking on eggshells. She's in a catch-22 because if she says anything, it's probably going to set him off. And if she doesn't say anything, he feels like she is withdrawing and not giving him the attention he wants. Bottom line, he wants to control her. Remember, in previous shows, I explained that domestic violence is about power and control. The abuser uses certain tactics in a pattern of behavior to establish and maintain power and control in that relationship. Now, in this tension building phase, as he gets more tense, as the situation gets more tense, the abuse eventually escalates. It may start out with yelling, slapping, and calling her names. She might try to pacify him, but this only escalates his behavior, rendering her helpless and releasing his rage. This can go on for days, weeks, even years. So that first phase in this cycle of violence is called the tension building phase. That's where that tension is building, where she's walking on eggshells, where she knows something is about to happen and she's trying to pacify him and do things that are not going to cause the actual episode, but it's, it's a catch-22. If she doesn't say anything, then, that's going to be a problem. If she does say something, then, that escalates it even further. So the next phase in this cycle of violence is called the battering phase. This is the phase where the batterer loses it. Some women experience emotional brutality, but it's usually physical violence. The rage is blind and senseless, and he is transformed into a madman. The victim describes her husband as physically transformed, such as his eyes bulge, his pupils dilate, and he is seething with rage. This is usually the stage where the police are called. And I've had lots of victims tell me that just before their abuser attacked them, that his eyes turned black. And so that is like the time where you see the police are called. It's the violence has escalated. The actual battering has occurred. And that is what is called the battering phase. Now, the last phase of this cycle of violence is called the honeymoon phase. Now, if you tune into the show regularly, you've heard me often speak about the abuser having a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality. They are one way in public and another way behind closed doors. In the honeymoon phase, Mr. Hyde goes back to being the sweet, charming, and loving Dr. Jekyll. Unless you see this transformation, it's hard to believe that this could be the same person. By this time, the battered woman is in such a physical and mental state that she is putty in his hands. When he acts sweet, he is actually working his psychological tactics and digging his claws of control more deeply into her. He cons her into thinking that she is the key to his emotional well-being. He wants her to feel that he depends on her for forgiveness. At the same time, she thinks that this is how she'll get back the real man, the real person, the person that she says this is the real, this is that person that gets angry, that's not him. This is the real, I'm waiting for him to get back to the real him. She believes that his violent side is not the real person, but rather his sweet side is. But not realizing that actually the opposite is true. The sweet side is a con. That's a lie. Just a more sophisticated tactic to get deeper into her and suck the life right out of her. Then they go right back to the first phase, which is that tension building phase. It's only a matter of time until the tension builds again from the areas in his life where he is not in control. And the cycle repeats itself again and again. Now, remember, I said before I started talking about this cycle that I was using the example of a man being the abuser. Of course, we know that women are abusive as well. There are male victims. Like I always say, I work with a lot of male victims, but specifically when you hear about this cycle, it is usually derived from a man being the abuser in cases where the male is the abuser and the female is the victim. So just understand that there is a cycle. So when you ask yourself the question, or you ask somebody else a question, or you ask a victim the question, why would you stay in that situation? Why are you still in that abusive situation? And I talked, I don't know if it was the last show, but within the last couple of weeks, I talked about how that person, that disease is a sickness. It's likened to Stockholm syndrome. Domestic violence is a disease that people are actually caught up in this cycle. And it's male victims as well as female victims that are caught up in this cycle of abuse. It's very real. If you have not ever experienced it, then you probably would wonder how. If you've never been around anybody, if you've never worked in the field, you probably would ask that question. But the bottom line is, when a person is in an abusive relationship, that relationship for that person that's doing the abusing is all about power and control. They have to have the power and the control in that relationship. So Make sure that when you're dating, during that dating process, you ask a lot of questions, including what's the person's definition of love. Like I said earlier, everybody's definition of love is not the same. It would be very wise for you to understand that the person you're dating, specifically if you're dating them seriously, and it's going like you may end up marrying this person, you want to really know what their definition of love is. Not all wolves come in sheep's clothing, and not all wolves come disguised as Little Red Riding Hood. Some people come as who they are. You just weren't paying attention. You were blinded by his charm, his good looks, but his behavior needs to be tried and proven. How does he react under pressure? How does he react when he gets upset? Does he throw things? Does he treat you with respect? What's his relationship like with his mother? Pay attention, because that is a clear indication of what his relationship is going to be like with you. And then the same thing for women. She could have a pretty face and have it all together on the outside, but is she pretty on the inside? Is she one way in public and then Cruella de Vil behind closed doors? We have to stop being so superficial when it comes to relationships. Don't just look at the outer appearance of a person. Take some time to get to know that person. Take some time to get to know their heart. What are they like on the inside? What kind of person are they on the inside? Look at the heart of the person. Man looks at the outer appearance, but God looks at the heart. Because some people will just play games with your emotions. They're not serious about being in a relationship. They will gladly take whatever you give them with no intention of reciprocating. So people with low self-esteem really get taken advantage of. That's why it's so important to work on you before entering into a relationship, specifically if you have been hurt in a previous relationship. Take some time to get healed and made whole, because I found that even though I was healed, being made whole was a whole nother process. So make sure that before, specifically if you've been hurt, specifically if you've been in an abusive relationship physically, make sure that you get counseling. Make sure that you take some time to, get healed and be a whole person again. Because if you do not take that time, you are setting yourself up for getting back in the same kind of relationship, or maybe even one worse, because you are going to attract where you are at. So make sure that you take some time to heal and to be made whole. It's a process. And for me, it was two totally different processes, because I thought after the healing, everything was good. But then, no, I found out that I was still not a whole person. So I had to take time off and allow the Lord to heal me and make me whole. And I'm still going through a process. And I know that not everybody hurts people intentionally, but hurting people do hurt other people. Some people have just been so severely emotionally abused that the pain they endured was just as damaging as physical abuse, if not more, because bruises go away, but emotional abuse can last a lifetime. Bruises will go away, but that emotional abuse can last a lifetime if it's not dealt with. That's why I call emotional abuse the silent killer, because you can be in an emotionally abusive relationship for years and not even know it. I know people, I've met people, I've worked with people, I've assisted people that before it got to that physical state, it was emotionally abusive. Maybe for a short period of time, maybe for a long period of time. Remember, the emotional abuse escalates. It escalates, and it usually escalates into the physical violence. So just make sure that you understand, and I understand that not everybody is, just out there trying to hurt people. Some people just have been hurt themselves. In emotional abuse, it can last a lifetime. It is a silent killer if you do not get help. Now, I want to expound a little bit on the emotional abuse, and I've done a show on this before, but I just see it so often in relationships that people really need to be educated on what it is, how subtle it is, because you don't realize that it is if nobody ever points it out to you. And then, like I say often, on the outside looking in, when you look back at the situation you were in, you see it a lot clearer. But when you're in it, even if somebody points it out to you, you still don't see it as being abusive. But when you understand the warning signs, when somebody can point that out to you, and I think, again, prevention is key. Education is the key to prevention. So, we got to get more educated on what emotional abuse is, because, again, people just don't realize it. If they don't see physical bruises, they don't identify that as being emotional abuse. Again, I said I want to expound on this. And the specific area that I wanted to focus on is this abuse, emotional abuse, that is called gaslighting. It's called gaslighting. It is probably the most crazy making forms of emotional abuse. And when I first read about it, I was, surprised at how many people that go through this and don't really see it as, well, it's designed that you don't realize what it is. It's very subtle, but it's called gaslighting. It is a denial of your experiences and your perception of reality. The abuser will emphatically deny that they said or did something when you for a fact know that they did say it. They do this to make you start questioning your own reality. And they make you think that you're crazy. Oh, I never said that. I never did that. So they start to make you question your own reality. So if you question your own reality, then that gives them more leverage in the relationship. The more they do this, the more you question your reality, and then you start accepting their definition of reality, or accepting what they're saying reality is. The abuser will attack something they know you are insecure about, or something that is important to you, and they know how to push your buttons. That's what a gaslighter do. They are master manipulators. Gaslighters are master manipulators. They are masters at manipulating and finding people they know will stand by them no matter what. They are masters at manipulating and finding people they know will stand by them no matter what. The gaslighter will make you think that the people he or she is lying to are in agreement with them. When they use this tactic, it makes you feel like you don't know who to trust or who to turn to, leading you right back to the gaslighter. And that's exactly where they want you to be. Isolation gives them more control, and an abuser will isolate their partner from supportive family and friends. And I talk about that often. That is one of the key signs that you are in an abusive relationship, or somebody you know may be in an abusive relationship. Maybe you might suspect it, or maybe you have a friend, maybe you have a family member that you may suspect. They used to be one way before, happy, bubbly, always this, happy person, and always outgoing and wanting to spend time with their family and want to spend time with their friends. And now all of a sudden they're in a relationship with somebody new, or, somebody different from what maybe they may have been in before. And this new relationship, you start to notice these different things happening. You start to notice that this person is isolating themselves from family members and friends. That is a key sign that relationship may be abusive. Now, if you've ever read The Power and Control Wheel, it defines isolation as a person that controls what you do, who you see, who you talk to, what you read, and where you go. They limit your outside involvement, and then they use jealousy to justify their actions. So gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse that is very, very subtle. And once the victim figures out what's going on and starts thinking about leaving or calls them out on their actions, the abuser will become very apologetic, very romantic, because now they're trying to woo you back into the relationship, back and get back into your good graces. But as soon as you come back around, you start trusting them again, and then they will start back with that same behavior. But now it's harder to leave because you have already started to believe them again. You've already gotten back into that place where you trust them. You've gotten back into that place where you won't, you're hoping and believing that, okay, they are going to change. And I can tell you how many women I've worked with. I cannot tell you how many women I worked with that told me they live in a whole nother state and was doing very well for themselves. They had a good job, they had a car, they had a place to live, and then they abandoned all of that to move there with their partner. And then they find out, or to move wherever, to move here to Florida, to move wherever they were to usually a long ways away from home. They find out that this person is very abusive verbally and physically, and then now they feel stuck. So remember, there are a lot of things, or a lot of reasons that people stay in abusive relationships, and love is one of those reasons. And it is, it truly is. People truly do love the person that they're in a relationship, even though they are abusive. So please recognize that abuse comes in many forms, not just physical. Emotional abuse is very common, but it's very subtle. And most people don't even realize that they are in emotionally abusive relationships. It takes a toll on a person's mental and physical state when they stay in an abusive relationship for long periods of time. And remember, again, 1 Corinthians 13, 4 and 7 is very clear on what love is and what it's not. It's patient, kind, it's not jealous, it does not brag, it's not arrogant, it does not act unbecomingly, it does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, and endures all things. Now remember, if you're in an abusive relationship and you decide to leave, understand that this can be the most dangerous time. So please make sure that you contact an agency that has a victim advocate that can help you develop a safety plan so that you and your kids can leave safely. Most police departments, sheriff's departments, women's centers, domestic violence shelters all have victim advocates. And if you don't know where to go in your area, contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. They have victim advocates on call 24/7 that are ready to help you in the event of an emergency. Please call 911. Well, that's all the time I have for tonight. For more information on Michelle's Haven, call 321-458-5454 or email me at michelleshaventalkshow@gmail.com or visit my website at perfectloveinc.com. For highlights of tonight's show, visit me on Facebook at Michelle's Haven. Thank you for tuning into tonight's show. Remember to guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. I'll meet you back here this same time next week at the Haven, Michelle's Haven. Come get empowered.